Howdy folks, I'm Hank Sheffer, and welcome to another true life story right here with Larry Hedrick on Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.
Along about the middle of Ronald Reagan's first presidential run, it became obvious that he was going to run for another presidential term, and I was quite certain he was going to win, and I wanted to be in his inaugural parade and march down Pennsylvania Avenue. You know, I had a cavalry unit. I had all the military saddles. I had the men recruited. We had all the uniforms and stuff like that. Somebody once said, if you want something you've never had, you've got to do something you've never done. Well, every job I ever had in my life I'd never done before, so I didn't see that as much as an obstacle. So I admit that I had a misconception about how this worked, because I thought there was somebody up in Washington, D.C. that sat around watching all the parades all across the country, and they picked who they wanted to be in the inaugural parade. But nothing could be further from the truth. And as time went by, I was watching the news one night, and a member of the Presidential Inaugural Committee was being interviewed, and the phone number went across the screen, so I called it the next day. And I got a set of application forms sent to me in the mail to be in this parade. And there was quite a list of things that you had to do in order to qualify. One was, of course, submitting pictures of your organization. You had to submit the names and other information of all the members that's in your group, because the Secret Service is going to run them by and check them out. Even your horses had to have special shoes on the bottom of their hooves. You had to have parade insurance. You had to have all kinds of things. And some of my guys owned their own horses, but none of us were interested in dragging those horses all the way from Arizona to Washington, D.C. So we decided we were going to rent. Well, in order to get the parade insurance, I had to go over and meet with a guy. I looked him up in the phone book and found this fellow that offered this kind of insurance, and went over to Scottsdale and met with him. And when he saw the picture of the group and what we wanted to present, he was very interested. And it was getting late in the time frame in order to get your application mailed in and everything. And he said that he knew a couple of guys that were on the Republican National Committee, and that he was going to talk to them. Well, all three of them come out to my house one day out in Apache Junction. And these two guys offered to hand carry my application with all the information and back to Washington, D.C. and put it on top of the stack. Well, that's what you call greasing the skids, I guess. But, you know, as you look at the whole thing, the application said that, you know, you stood a better chance if you had somebody like a governor or a senator that would back your organization. Well, I didn't have anybody to back the organization, and this was a good deal to me to have these fellows carry that application back there. Well, you know, it's a very expensive thing to do this. Nobody gives you any money for this. Every man had to pay for his own airfare. Every man had to pay for his rental horse. Every man had to share hotel rooms, renting cars, buy your own food. There's quite a bit of money involved in doing this. And even back in the 80s, we figured it was going to cost about $800 a piece to do this. And I had 9 guys going on the trip. And after we were selected and we got the letter in the mail that we were selected to be in the parade, a gentleman contacted me from an organization called the Confederate Memorial Hall. And he offered to put us up in this Confederate Memorial Hall free of charge. Well, that was very appealing. There was some money we didn't have to spend. So when we got back there, you know, we took a week doing this, and when we got back there, we ended up sleeping in the same old iron frame beds that those Confederate veterans slept in after the Civil War. And in the basement was a museum. It was a great time, and of course the parade people had to have all your phone numbers. They had to be able to contact you and everything. We rented a couple of station wagons, and we hung around the Memorial Hall most of the time. And one little quirk that we understood was one of these gentlemen that hand carried the application back there happened to be present in the office with Ronald Reagan when the parade committee gave him a review of who was going to be in the parade. The president does not pick who's going to be in the parade. The committee picks these people, but I'm sure he could have a say if he didn't like something. And it came up that somebody said, we can't let a Confederate organization by name go down Pennsylvania Avenue. And Ronald Reagan himself said, well, they were selected by that name, and that's how they're going to ride. Ronald Reagan played Confederate officers in several movies. He didn't have any problem with that. Well, what we really did was we had a color guard representing America's mounted military history. I had sent off to the U.S. Army and bought the series of 8x10 photographs called the American Soldier Series, starting with the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican War of 1848, the Union soldier of the Civil War, and then of course, I don't care what else he was an American soldier. I had a Confederate soldier next to him. And then of course, we had the Indian Wars represented in all the uniforms, the Spanish-American War I and World War II. The World War I uniform that we used belonged to Clarence Barclay, Tex Barclay's brother. And his wife gave me that uniform, and that's the one that we wore in the parade. And the World War II belonged to my uncle, Jack Ewing, who was killed in a B-17 in 1945. So the picture that you see here is me wearing my uncle's uniform. So the morning of the parade, we got a phone call from the government. It was 9 degrees below zero with a wind chill of 22 degrees below zero, and all the instruments were sticking to the lips of the band members. They called off the parade. After all this effort to get here, which was nothing short of a miracle in my estimation, the parade was now canceled, and our heads were hanging pretty low. But about an hour later, we got another phone call. We were to all go to the Baltimore Civic Center where the Baltimore Bullets play and meet there, and Ronald Reagan would come and entertain us. So it wasn't a complete loss, but it was still disappointing that we didn't go down Pennsylvania Avenue. Well, we were there. We had the rental cars, and we'd planned anyway to do this, so we went to the Battle of Bull Run, the first major battle of the Civil War. We went to Gettysburg, which was the middle, and then we went to Appomattox, which was the end. And we went in uniform and all that kind of stuff, you know. And some funny things happened on our way to the forum. We stopped at a McDonald's in Alexandria, Virginia, and all of us piled out of the cars in uniform, Confederate uniforms, and went into McDonald's. And everybody was staring at us. And finally, this one big fella got up and walked over and asked who we were. I thought it was pretty obvious who we were. But I turned and I said, "We are with the German Luftwaffe here for battle training with the United States Army." And he bought it. We got our hamburgers and went on down the road. At Gettysburg, even though the next day it was still below zero, I had always wanted to walk Pickett's Charge battlefield. And I walked that whole thing, and I like to froze to death. But as I walked across there, I was remembering the diaries of the Union soldiers and the Confederate soldiers, of the things they wrote about as they went across that mile of open field under the most galling fire in the history of the world, where 600 pounds of lead was expended for every casualty. And on the Confederate side, you had 6,000 casualties. How much lead was that? So on that first inaugural that was canceled, we rented horses in Winchester, Virginia. And we went out to the arena to ride them 2 days before the event. And they all looked like woolly mammoths. They had hair hanging off their bellies 6 inches. They were the most horrible looking horses you ever saw in your life. And I obviously hadn't been ridden very much, because the first guy that threw a saddle on one, it was rodeo time, and he went off across the arena kicking his heels up, and it was a disaster. I thought, we can't ride these horses in the parades to have a runaway of all things. And the horse I got on immediately laid down on the ground, and I rode him all the way down and rode him all the way back up. But we spent about 3 hours doing nothing but wheels. Not left turns, but wheels. All 8 of us in a row making a sweeping turn, and that's all we knew we had to do through the whole parade route, was make wheels. And finally, after about 3 hours of this, the horses, when I gave the command and then said, "Ho!" those horses were automatically speeding up on the outside. They knew what they were doing. And as we left the arena, I told the guy, I said, you know, I'm a little disappointed in the looks of these horses. And he says, well, don't worry about it. We'll fix them up before we bring them over. Well, of course, the parade didn't happen. He didn't have to bring those horses all the way from Winchester to Washington, D.C. and take them back. But he didn't give us any money back either. It was an interesting trip, and we're glad we got to go. And I thought, you know, whoever the next president is, we should be right at the top of the list to be reselected automatically. What a disappointment. But you know, on the next one, I applied, and there were only 4 units that were reselected, and we were one of them. Now, the same thing happened when we went to the next presidential parade, which was for Bush. We rented horses in Maryland. And I got a call from somebody, says, you know, you better check into something. You may have a problem with those horses in Maryland. So I called Senator McCain's office, and he sent 2 aides out to this place, and he said, there's only 1 horse out there. And it was just another day, just 2 more days before the event. He only had 1 horse that lined up in the arena. So we ended up getting the horses in Virginia. And there was a television station from Richmond, Virginia, that came out to Mr. Lamb's farm, who had rented horses for other groups in the parade. And we went out there to do the same thing, ride them and do this, and plus the fact that we knew we were sandwiched between 2 bands. So we had a big boom box that somebody carried behind us with the horses and turned the sound up so we would know how the horses were going to react to this. But the TV story come out that night on the Richmond News about the horses in Maryland not working out, and he said the word nag was used. They have a lot of pride in their Virginia horses, and they did quite well. They were very patient. The inaugural parade was slow getting started, so we finally got to go down Pennsylvania Avenue as America's mounted military history and all these colorful uniforms. And here was national TV. They said, this must be the group from Apache Junction, Arizona. What a colorful outfit. And our mission was complete. and we had a chance to go over and talk to the Arizona code talkers from the Navajo Nation and all that kind of thing. We met a lot of celebrities coming and going on the plane and the airport and stuff like that. And it was an amazing time, and it was well worth the effort after all. But that's how you get into inaugural parade, folks.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.